This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
New from Radiotopia presents Red for Revolution, an audio drama about Black love, queer romance, and liberation. Join Jasmine, an 18-year-old navigating her queer identity while learning about her grandmother's secret love affair. Through her discoveries, we're transported back to 1971 to witness two remarkable women embark on a romance that defies all conventions. Subscribe to Radiotopia Presents and listen to Red for Revolution wherever you get your podcasts.
With the state of today's economy, it's more important than ever to invest in products that last for years to come. As the seasons shift and get cooler, make sure your closet is stocked with durable layers that stand the test of time from American Giant. American Giant's clothes work harder and are wearable season after season. Their greatest hoodie ever made is made from the highest quality materials that are cut and sewn right here in the United States. So you're investing right back in your local community. Choosing American Giant means taking a stand for American manufacturing and hardworking Americans, something other mega corporations don't care about. From fleece to knit, all in a range of colors for versatile daily wear, American Giant delivers everyday pieces designed for everyday life. Feel the difference of quality, made-to-last clothes from American Giant. Get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20 at american-giant.com. That's 20% off your first order at american-giant.com with code STAPLE20.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Another edition of MIP on 89.3 on this Monday, December 1st, as we start out the last month of the year. This is it, y'all. We're right. You know, the year has gone by so swiftly, and here we are. I want to, we've got a very special guest joining us now, and he's someone who's no stranger to the Make It Plain audience as we think seriously and talk seriously about issues that have come up in the past couple of weeks. In particular, what happened just a few days ago with those tragic National Guard shootings. And since we're broadcasting in the district, we want to be sure to have this conversation. And for those who don't know, many of you have seen him on TV over the years, as we have discussed a lot of national intelligence issues. He's even written a number of books on these issues, and even, I believe, a novel or two, as a matter of fact. And so we want to talk the plot to hack America, the plot to betray America, defeating ISIS. He is an security expert. He was in the Navy. He was a cryptologist in the Navy and has been involved in any number of counterterrorism, intelligence, and combat operations. Let me just say also here that, you know, as a Black community, we know how during the 60s intelligence was never kind to us. And I remember, as a matter of fact, I'm in Chicago now, spending the Thanksgiving holiday with Reverend Jackson, who, folks, thanks to your prayers, um, has recovered tremendously and is doing well. So please keep him lifted, Reverend Jesse Jackson. And I remember Reverend Jackson had has a lot of respect for our guest, because they say, Mark, we always had people in intelligence working against us. Now we have a brother who has a career in intelligence, who's actually able to tell us what's going on and can inform us. And in many respects, we didn't have anything like that or anyone like that before Malcolm Nance. And so whenever these types of things come up, I always try to reach out to him to get his expertise. There's no way in the world that others would have shared this with us, because over the years, so many who worked in intelligence seem to be working against us. But after what happened with the National Guard, I thought we'd do well. He's also, I don't think would necessarily call himself this, but Malcolm also has become a journalist in many ways, because he asks journalistic questions, asks and looks into investigative journalistic questions. And I called him on the phone yesterday, and the brother sounded like a journalist. He was asking fundamental questions about what happened. So we want to talk about this. Malcolm Nance joins us, MIP on 89.3. Malcolm, welcome back to Make It Plain, my brother. How are you?
I'm very well. You'll have to forgive me there, um, Mark, because the signal's a little broken, but I'm using all my cryptologic skills to hear what you're saying. I hear you.
Well, okay, you hear me good. Well, you look and sound good on this end.
Okay.
So
You're in. But go ahead with your questions.
Yes, sir. Well, glad to have you. Well, first of all, we have been told that the shooter who shot both of the National Guard members used to work for the CIA in Afghanistan. So I thought, who better to talk to than you about this? That's troubling, but it raises a lot of questions. So let me kind of turn it over to you as you've looked at this and analyzed this. How did it, when you heard that news, how did the investigation start for you? What questions came up for you?
Well, my first thought was, when I heard that he was an Afghan National Army person who was part of the CIA, what they call zero teams or zero units, I knew it was going to start a conspiracy theory. It's just the nature of the game. People don't understand how intelligence and intelligence processes work. However, this individual was one of 10,000 that we got out of Afghanistan because he had been a loyal ally to the United States. Now, let's fast forward. He came in 2001. He was vetted by the CIA for the job. He served in the zero units for years, as many as 7 years, from 18 to 25, and then he came to the United States, and then he lived here peacefully as a U.S. resident, getting his asylum this year. The question that we all have to ask is, one, well, wait, I don't want to ask this question. I want to say, let's make some statements. One, people don't do false flag operations by hiring somebody who is easily identified, who comes from a hostile country, who has worked for us, and goes out and does a shooting at random on H&I Street in Washington, D.C. Northwest. That's the movies. The movies works that way. Real life doesn't work that way. One thing that I can divine, and I spoke to you about this before, is that this individual, whatever was going on in his mind, which made him lash out when he got 1 block from the White House. Had he continued straight down 17th Street, he would have gone to the old executive office building entry towards the White House. If he had turned left down 8th Street, he would have been in Lafayette Square. He would have had all the people who represented the United States government with guns that he wanted. Also, he drove, or at least we believe he drove from Washington State to Washington, D.C. He may have flown. They've been very tight-lipped about how he transported himself and got to that intersection of 17th and H at Farragut Square, right? So him coming all this way, he would have had an enormous amount of time to think about what he was doing. But you don't waste, you don't go out and do, a shooting of two National Guardsmen in order to change the dynamic of the political scene in Washington, D.C. No, he could have stayed in Washington State if he was an Islamic extremist and shot up a mall, or he could have gone to Joint Base Lewis McCord, where he probably got in process from. And he could have shot 20 soldiers before being killed. He didn't. He drove or made his way to Washington, D.C., got that one block from the White House and couldn't hold it in anymore and lashed out at the four people that he saw, which there were four guardsmen, they patrol in fours. And he stepped up and shot the first two with a revolver, a 357 Magnum, which means he absolutely didn't want the mission to fail, because using a semi-automatic pistol, it could jam, right? A revolver will always work so long as the bullets are proper. But this tells me one of two things. One, he had a mental breakdown, clearly. That well, the question is, what's the precipitating event? And the biggest one that's going on in America right now is the horrible immigration policy. We don't know whether he was picked up by ICE. We don't know whether he was, had some other precipitating event that could have made him lash out. The other would have been latent Islamic extremist recruiter, right? He was recruited by ISIS or some other group, or he just suddenly found what he thought was his religion and lashed out. But he drove across the United States over 4 days. He could have lashed out 100 times on that transit across the country and made a much more significant statement. So that tells me that this is a mental problem, which he couldn't even hold it till he got in front of the White House.
Now, the Associated Press seemingly has discovered some emails, Malcolm, where there's some indication he was having trouble holding down a job. And apparently that came out just yesterday. But it's still, but let me just say this. I mean, if you're driving that amount of time, extremely premeditated, and you're determined, because now the average person, well, and let's not say he's average, because he was a zero unit. I want you to tell us more about what a zero unit is. But you drive 4 days all the way from Washington State. You got a little time to think about what you're doing,
right?
And whether or not you really want to. That really takes some real determination, and then to come that far, and when you probably could have done something more devastating, as you said, either staying at home or going a block down the street, actually to the White House. That's what makes it bizarre. And I know you want to. Here's the paradox, Malcolm. I know you want to discourage conspiracy theories, but some of the questions you're raising make people wonder even more. Like, wait a minute, what is really going on here? But tell us about, first of all, what was a zero unit, and what did that entail?
Okay, could you repeat that last question?
Tell me about what a zero unit was, and what was one.
Yeah, these were units, and we've since 1948, right, the founding of the CIA, we have used proxies, or we have used allies who assist us in operations. The CIA has a paramilitary branch, right? These are the people that do military operations and things like that. And in Afghanistan, they wanted to build up units that were subordinate to the Ministry of the Interior or to the intelligence ministry, who would come under the control of the CIA and do more direct actions without having to use all the resources of a special forces team. And you would train these people using special operations personnel and CIA paramilitary officers. And then you would let the local capability go out and do the mission. So if you didn't want to risk an American citizen in a high-risk abduction, you would train these teams, these guys who were loyal to their paycheck, definitely, and the promises that you would give their family. They would go out and do that mission for you. In Iraq, we built up the Iraqi, the Iraq Ministry of the Interior SWAT team. These were units that had the incredible capabilities Iraqi special forces, same thing, right? And other small paramilitary units. Iran, by the way, did the exact same thing in Iraq, and they're still bugabooing us to this day. This guy's units, these zero units, these CIA supported special operations units, were highly vetted. And this guy made the rank of sergeant, which means that he went over the years doing these jobs, doing these missions. And what I find interesting is he had an enormous capability in training. But if you look at how he lashed out, he used a single revolver. As a person who got asylum, he has a green card. He can buy firearms. He could have bought an M4 rifle. There are 1,000 people in the United States who would have sold him an M4 rifle from the back of a trunk of a car, right? These things are, or an AK-47, easily acquirable, which tells me that he didn't think that this is what he wanted to do. He didn't want a mass murder. Again, it's what's playing out in his mind. This is the difference between these, Walmart shooters and elementary school shooters, and the guy who has one target in his head, shoots that person, and then shoots themselves. Where the psychological defects are two entirely different worlds apart. And this man's psychological defect, he could have gotten an M4 and thousands of rounds and driven across the United States and created mayhem, right? He didn't. He got to one block and he shot two individuals. And the question is why? What motivated him to do that? And we're going to have to wait to see what more evidence comes out.
Is it unusual? Would it be unusual for you to find someone who had been evacuated, who was served, who came here, and them not being able to adjust because they didn't find a job? Now, mind you, and I did some chronological math yesterday. When did you say, how long has he been in this country?
Yeah, and there's another factor here that I think that we as Americans are pretty, besides our own national and racial prejudices, we tend to think that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and trauma only happens to us, right? We don't consider the people that we may have trained to go out and do horrible things, or people we've dropped bombs on. They have mental health and trauma issues too. So, and it could have been a question of adjustment, but this guy was an Afghan who was living half of the life of a U.S. Special Operations soldier. And he loses his country, but he comes here. He's theoretically going to a better life, theoretically, because we always think our world's better. And a lot of the other factors we don't know: mother, father, extended cousins, extended family, the cultural pressures for him. I don't know whether he's married. He might be married, might have children. But the things that would affect a person who comes from a Pashtun speaking region of Afghanistan is very, very different than a guy who lives in Ames, Iowa, or Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, right? And our biggest problem as Americans is we think once you've gotten here to the big Walmart that all your problems are solved. Well, look at what's happening to immigrants. We don't know what what he felt. And until we get those things, till he starts talking, this is starting to look, it could have been problem of all of those stressors, as you said. Not so much adjustment. There's 10,000 Afghans here. There are Afghan communities everywhere in the United States now, some of whom have big concentrations. You can move there and it would be like going to a very nice neighborhood in Kabul. But this man is an individual. And again, the way that he lashed out, how he lashed out, he could have done an enormous more damage. Tells me that we're dealing more with a psychological trauma than we are, growing pains. I mean, if you guys really want to think about what does it look like people struggling to adjust and trying to work who didn't get these advantages he has, go watch the first Godfather, right? Where Don Corleone is a low-level runner for the mafia and then has to prove himself to shoot people just to get more bread on his family's table. A lot of those things are taken away. He doesn't have the real immigrants experience that a lot of harder immigrant groups have. But for him, it may have been difficult.
With the state of today's economy, it is more important than ever to invest in products that last for years to come. As the seasons shift and get cooler, make sure your closet is stocked with durable layers that stand the test of time from American Giant. American Giant's clothes work harder and are wearable season after season. Their greatest hoodie ever made is made of the highest quality materials that are cut and sewn right here in the United States. So you're investing right back into your local community. Choosing American Giant means taking a stand for American manufacturing and hardworking Americans, something other mega corporations don't care about. From fleece to knit, all in a range of colors for versatile daily wear, American Giant delivers everyday pieces designed for everyday life. Feel the difference of quality made-to-last clothes from American Giant. Get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20 at american-giant.com. That's 20% off your first order at american-giant.com with code STAPLE20.
You mentioned to me over the phone yesterday. You mentioned PTSD and how that's a possibility, but you also mentioned to me that there's something about where these types of individuals are settled, and that stood out to me as unusual. Talk to us a little bit more about the people being settled like him in the on the Pacific, in the far west, and places like that, and what that's all about.
hmm I do a podcast called Black Man Spy. I'm gonna
Yes.
expand on this because this was an interesting point we discussed. We have this weird racist, and I use the word racist professionally here, attitude towards people that we bring to this country. Good example. When we use when the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in the United States started moving Somalis who were endangered uh, to the United States, they moved them and put them in a community. That community is Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, which is distinctly 100% geographically opposite of where they came from, right? It's like we want to put them in places where they will be forced to adjust to the American dream in an extreme that they're not used to. Now, if somebody had called me and said, Malcolm, we've got 10,000 Somalis in the United States. Where do you want to put them? I would have said, Albuquerque, New Mexico, or, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, Phoenix, Arizona, someplace which would be closer to their life. But I think that these putting, Afghans in Washington state, right? Shoving them up there near Seattle or the outskirts, even though they may have a support system for the military and the Afghan evacuation people. It is very unlike where they're from. If you're not from Asadabad, right? The mountains in the northeastern corner of Afghanistan, or if you're not from Jalalabad and those mountains like the Tora Bora Mountains, this is not where you're from, right? Those places are deciduous rainforests. Now there are parts of Afghanistan that have that, but it's strange how we we group these people in places where we think we don't want them to be like where they came from. And it's not because a lot of those communities are very open and warm and chubby about it. It's because I think, in a counterterrorism perspective, we think that if they're in an environment where they're from, they may, start those thinking about wicked ways like they did in Somalia or Afghanistan. Look at the way Donald Trump spoke about the Somali community this week. They had nothing to do with this guy. Zip, zero, nada. And he spoke about them because he, as a professional racist, views them as a body in Minnesota as a foreign object, as a foreign entity. And for him, it's not it's something that should be gotten rid of. If he had his way, he'd ship everybody back to Mogadishu tomorrow, no matter how much support they gave us. Same thing with these Afghans.
Do we know whether or not, and I want to say his name. Forgive me, y'all. I've not said his name yet, but I want to say it. Rahmanullah Lakanwal,
Wow.
Lakanwal, Rahmanullah. Do we know whether or not he had a family, a wife, or children, anything while he was here?
Yeah, we don't know that definitively yet. There are some people who are talking. I'm going to leave that till we start getting some information about him, because it's one thing when we start speculating, because he may have a wife and kids. Are they here? Yes, they are here. But when you get here, there are a lot of things that you're not getting in Kabul or Khost or Jalalabad or other parts of Afghanistan that are necessary for them to achieve happiness. We had a famous case of a Palestinian about 20 years ago who came to the United States, opened up shop in Colorado, very nice, suburb of Denver. And his daughter was the one who was adjusting to the United States. And he didn't like it. The husband and wife plotted and murdered her. And the only reason we know about it is because the FBI had not accidentally, they had been deliberately wiretapping their house on suspicion of being supporters of Hamas. And they heard the murder of the daughter because the daughter was the one who had adjusted to the American way of life and was hanging out with boys and going out to events at her school and things like that. So we don't really know a lot about this guy, and I think we should all wait before we can make any more in-depth decisions about what and how he was motivated.
Folks, 202-588-0893. Quick calls from Malcolm Nance, Black Man Spy. Is it conceivable, or let me put it another way, is it common for those who worked for the government in Afghanistan, who worked for the CIA even in Afghanistan, to be brought to this country, to be settled here in America, and to have trouble finding their way, finding work, finding a job? Is that common?
Well, the thing is, we've done this many times before. Okay, it's just a lot of times it was done quietly. Good example: the boat people of Vietnam. Right? These were, South Vietnamese army, Vietnamese government officials, people who just wanted to get out of Vietnam when North Vietnam took over. And they got on their boats, and we rescued most of those people and we brought them to the United States. It really depends on the community. If there's a community, it's easier to acclimatize and get a job. This guy's job was one thing as an adult. He didn't grow up as a goat herder. Okay. He didn't grow up opening a barber shop or a men's saloon, as they call it, there in Khost. This guy's job was kidnapping and killing people for an intelligence agency. He was a direct action soldier. That does not translate well anywhere else. Now, if Malcolm Nance had been in charge of the adjustment of these individuals, you have to put them in a job that they can excel at. And I mean, I would have tried to make them private security contractors on merchant ships, for example. And that is a very well-paying job in demand all over the world. But if there's no placement, if it's just, okay, here's the mall, now you can go shopping, you can start paying $10 for a bag of, basmati rice, or $20 for a bag of basmati rice, and things that they're not used to. Also, foods that make them exceptionally fat. This guy, I saw the photograph when he was put in the ambulance. He was way heavier than he was when he was working with the United States government, right? So people can become despondent, not to mention large quantities of alcohol, unlimited access to guns. And, it's almost like we draw the cartoon for us to have these incidents. But there have been other incidents in other communities that you don't hear about. It's just this individual chose to carry out whatever, if he was having anxiety about work, why was there not a placement agency for these guys with people who speak, who speak Pashtun, who speak Dari, who speak, Farsi, whichever part of Afghanistan they're from? Our problem is that our care and feeding of these individuals is much worse than we do even for our own veterans, and our veterans are treated relatively badly.
And that's the other thing. Trump emphasizes first, he kind of shot himself in the foot. He said Biden let him in the country. It was Biden. Then come to find out, Trump gave him asylum, his administration
Hmm.
gave him asylum earlier this spring. But from what you're saying, that's not the issue. First of all, if
Mm-mm.
people worked for the US government in good faith during the Afghanistan occupation, we kind of should do right by them, right? I mean, it's not, what do you say to those people? The hell with you. Goodbye. That doesn't help. We've done that with other momentary allies, and then they turn on us anyway, right? Uh, um, Mujahideen, for example. So don't we kind of owe people something better, like what you just said? Placement, better places to live, something so they can come and adjust to a normal life, right?
Yeah, of course we owe them. Our problem is, okay, I'm gonna say this 1,000 times because as an intelligence professional, I recognize all the factors that go into trouble, and I don't shy away from them. America is a racist country. I mean, we are literally living in a cesspool, a tsunami of white anger, resentment, racism that is affecting every American. Every listener of your show, especially your listeners who didn't vote or voted for Donald Trump, you're getting it too, right? Whether you want it one way or the other. So don't think that the way that this man was abandoned or whether he was or not, whether he had support or not, it has no effect on you. Yeah, it could just as easily have been an African American National Guard soldier, right? It doesn't matter. These people need the same. If we give them the American promise, let's give them the full promise and don't just promise them to get off at the Walmart and kick them out.
That's very, very important to think about this. So again, while it may not pay to be conspiratorial, it never hurts to examine the problems and the pitfalls. Last thing, Malcolm,
Mhm.
at this hour, they're still saying he drove. Now, you raised a fundamental question, y'all. Now, y'all, everybody watches Law and Order, right? So everybody
Mhm.
ought to anticipate the fundamental question: where is the car? If that's true, where's the
Yeah.
car? Where was it parked? And I'm gonna also say this too, Malcolm. Back
Well,
when
mhm.
the guard first came into DC, you saw him. You don't see him everywhere anymore. So
Mhm.
you kind of gotta look for these folk. You don't just pull into town and you just see guard walking around everywhere, right? So
Right.
you have to
Right.
literally drive someplace to know where you're gonna see some National Guards people, right?
Right. Yeah, and National Guards people are everywhere. I spent 2 weeks in Washington, D.C. with a group called Remember Your Oath, reminding National Guardsmen not to do anything stupid, right? Like get involved in taking down American citizens or shooting American citizens. Because they've been put there for the purpose of policing a city that doesn't need their policing, right?
Right.
That has cops doing the job day in, day out. So the question about him, the first question anyone should ask in a counterterrorism perspective is, how did this individual transport himself from a place of origin, which is his home, let's assume in Washington state, to Washington, D.C.? If it was a vehicle, where's the vehicle? Is the vehicle, I mean, we don't know. Maybe he's sitting in his in his hospital bed, handcuffed to the bed, drinking a cup of coffee, and there is a vehicle with an explosive device in it with a 7-day delay. I don't know because no one's talked about it. Or if he flew, how did he fly with a handgun? Did he check it in? Did he obey all the laws? Same thing when he drove. Did he drive the speed limit? I don't know about you, but there's no one I know that can drive the 40, right? The Highway 40 or Highway 90, one of these highways at 100 miles per hour and not get pulled over at some point with a firearm in the car from Afghanistan, right? And not raise some red flags. So his method of transporting himself to Washington, D.C. is a critical question. Also, where did he, if he parked a car How did he transport himself to 17th and H and or 17th and I Street to end of Farragut Square? And why there? Why that intersection where he lost it? Drew a firearm. Was it that it was a female National Guard soldier? This man had been with U.S. Special Operations, and the CIA for almost a decade. He saw women left, right, and center, heard dirty talk and all sorts of things. Why would that suddenly trip him off? I doubt that that's it. I think he saw two people. That was it. His trigger went off. Target of opportunity. He did what he did, which is murder one individual and critically wounded another. We should,
And
until we get those questions, that's all. The only thing we can do is wait for more.
I think you also walked through yesterday possibly his age chronology and how old he might have been when he became activated with the CIA, when he became a sergeant. Can you walk us through that too? He had a few years of
Yeah. Yeah, he's a relatively young guy. He's 29 years old. He got his asylum here in 2025. He came here in 2021 when Afghanistan fell in August of 2021, which means that he was about 25 years old when he came here. He was the rank of sergeant E5, which they built the Afghan system based on ours. And he probably had been fighting as a soldier for at least 5 to 7 years, right? I mean, that's a rank of trust when you get to E5 in the Afghan army, which means you didn't screw up, that they liked you. You probably had relatively good proficiency in English. You carried out your operations. You weren't, drinking tea and sleeping on guard duty. He could have been in the armed forces as early as 16, 17 years old in Afghanistan, and joined these forces and then had 7 to 8 years of experience. Again, that lends to the question, why did he do this step up assassination with a single revolver instead of getting a real rifle that he had been carrying for years and do real damage?
Yeah.
Apparently only he will be able to answer that for us.
Malcolm Nance with us, folks. Malcolm, before we get a couple of calls in, let everybody know where they can find you on Substack and your podcast. Give us all the details.
Yeah, you can reach me at malcolmnance.substack.com or the Black Man Spy podcast on YouTube.
All right. And how often is this podcast out, Malcolm?
Oh, we put out a podcast a week, but I do a lot of commentary in between there. And there's always something stupid going on with the Trump administration.
Right. Michael, we've got callers. We don't have names, though, apparently. So let's just take the first caller. Caller, God bless you. You're on the air with Malcolm Nance. Go right ahead.
All righty.
Michael, we have a caller?
Yeah. Oh.
All right. Need it. So, caller, you're on the air. God bless you. Right. It helps if we have the names. That way they know I'm talking to them. Caller, you there?
All right, we'll go to the next one, Keyberry.
Keyberry, go right ahead, Keyberry. You're on the air with Malcolm Nance. God bless you.
This is Rick calling you.
My bad, man. This phone is messed up, bro.
That's
Okay.
Rick.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Caller,
Yeah, I
you
hear him.
next caller there. Go right ahead, caller. What's your name?
This is Rick calling you long distance from Germany.
Hey, Rick from Germany. Wie geht's? All's good?
Well, I just want to say to Brother Nance, thank God it wasn't an African American who pulled the trigger on those guardsmen. I think Trump wants to provoke poor people all over the country, both through the placement of the National Guard and through the disruption of the SNAP program. He wants to arouse poor people to riot, and he can declare martial law and possibly win a third term. What do you think about that, Brother Nance?
Ja, das ist genug. Wo bist du in Deutschland? Where are you at? Oh, you hung up. I love hearing from European guys who are overseas in Europe. I meet these retirees all the time. I'm afraid to say it. He's right. my first thought was, which every one of the 42 million African Americans always think, don't let it be an African American, right? Because we know the kind of malice that tends to come down on our community. And he's right. These deployments are designed to antagonize and provoke an armed response so that they can do what they did. Look, they're bringing in 500 more guardsmen into DC for no purpose. They have a police force, they have SWAT teams, they have federal officers everywhere. This is just a very obvious racist show of force. And if an incident happens where some group who gives themselves a name, who's, some gang, you can expect this to expand to other cities. And Trump will have the support of the 67% of white men that voted for him to do whatever he wants.
And obviously, a judge had ruled that the National Guard's occupation of DC was unlawful just
Yeah.
about 10 days ago, maybe a little less. And so now Trump is saying more guards people in DC, and obviously using this incident as a way to overrule the judge or to circumvent the court. This is an imminent threat. And, honestly, that, incites conspiracy. It's very convenient for something like that to happen. Now, I don't know what the judge will do. I don't know from the judge's ruling. I don't know that that still would change anything. But he's obviously using this politically. T. Berry is next. T. Berry, God bless you. You're on the air with Malcolm Nance. Go right ahead.
Okay, good. This whole thing is a mystery, not only to you, but to me and probably everybody else in this country. You heard him. I didn't hear the very beginning of your program, but I caught on when I listened when I heard him talking about the North Vietnamese. And one of the things that people may forget is that the North Vietnamese were like the people in Tulsa. They were very successful in Texas, and their community was attacked and torn down. No incidents or anything else. So I don't think it has to be that way. But what I think has to happen is when immigrants come into this country, they need to be taught about the nature of this country and that there is a lot of racism, just like there is around the world. You don't have to be in Iran or Iraq or Israel or Russia or any place else to get to a lot of hostility. And I think that when he was here, maybe the possibility is that he realized that who he was working for when he was with the CIA. I really don't know because, as I said, it's a big mystery to me as to what has happened. I wonder, though, if there should be mandatory training of people coming into the United States about who they're going to be dealing with, despite the fact that they want to get rid of that kind of thing in the school systems.
Well, that's an excellent question, and those are really good commentaries. Like you said, the South Vietnamese, for all of the talk that we hear from the MAGA people about you have to assimilate in the United States. The South Vietnamese immediately went back to what they did down in Texas and Louisiana, which is shrimping, right? They, in fact, they were the Forrest Gumps of the world. They saved the shrimp industry down and, off of those places. And, there's Vietnamese restaurants, Vietnamese grocery stores, Vietnamese beauty shops and salons. Everyone assimilates according to another pathway. And the worst part is we are sort of awful to the original owners of this country, the Native Americans, and we don't particularly like that they have their own lands and don't assimilate. And I don't say we, I'm talking about MAGA people, right? Normal people don't care. So should there be education and training? Yes, there should be. If we lived in a government that really cared about the people that they were bringing in. I think that they got as best as they're going to get in 2021. The only people who are coming to this country right now are white South Africans, and no one is vetting them. We had an incident. We brought in the first 45 white South Africans. They immediately got to the United States, and one of them murdered his wife in the first 7 days. And look, they put them in Florida, which is just like Cape Town and Durban. You know, they didn't put them up in Detroit, which is like Johannesburg. So they accommodated where they came from. Very interesting how we treat certain groups of people.
Yeah, we definitely treat other groups differently. And Malcolm, I promise that you go after this, but so the this is what's not unusual is that these incidents happen, and we may not hear any more about it. We may not get the very fundamental questions you're asking ever answered. You know how these things they blow up in the news cycle, and then you don't hear any more. As a matter of fact, even some of Trump's would-be supporters, um, like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, have begun to raise questions about Ryan
Mhm.
Root, the alleged Trump shooter.
Mhm.
You know, it's like that's disappeared. No, a lot of unanswered questions. Don't talk about it anymore. Does that concern you too? How that happens and questions are never answered? What are we supposed to do if we don't get the answers to these questions?
Well, this is where a lot of citizen journalism comes in. Yeah, I have questions. Okay. We have had 3 Capitol shootings, of which we really don't have a lot of information. Let me put it this way. The first one, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. The New York Times did some very good reporting. There's been some good information. But I'll tell you right now, if any of you can tell me what the motivation was, I'd be surprised. My assessment is that he was an individual who he was a loner, incel, right winger, who loved guns. He used to watch online gun shows. He was wearing a T-shirt from an online gun club when he carried out the act, and there was a precipitating event that no one discussed, which was 6 months before he attempted to assassinate Donald Trump. um, the 2 people, Alex Jones on InfoWards and a guy named Ivan Raskin, a former Special Forces officer, who was on his program, talked about how it would be great if Donald Trump was assassinated because then they could do all the mass murder fantasies that they wanted against liberals and minorities. My question is, did that kid listen to that program? Did he? It might have put it into his mind that he was doing America a favor. He killed 2 people, or 2 people got killed. He killed the man behind Trump. One of the other things about the Trump shooting there that I'm really having trouble with is there's no evidence Donald Trump was actually hit by a bullet. I mean, I see there's no scarring. I'm not being conspiracy theory here. There are doctors, surgeons, plastic surgeons who have really weighed in, and you can zoom in at 4K on that ear and see no evidence. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't a fragment of the plexiglass or of the teleprompter that may have touched his scalp, but I don't see any evidence of an ear that was shot by that bullet. There's a group that actually shoots a ear on a mannequin using gelatin that's like flesh. Can't do it without blowing it off, without tearing it apart. So that, and then of course, there's the shooting of Charlie Kirk. A million. That thing is just dropped off the radar. Nothing has been explained about that one, about the shooter. And then we find out the shooter may have been a Groyper, which is a right wing, far worse. These are the right wingers that hate MAGA. They're neo Nazis. A lot of them dabble in gay and trans issues. And this kid bought his grandfather's gun. How was the gun assembled on site? How was the gun disassembled on site? Why do all the videos? These are not conspiracy theories. This is a lack of information, a lack of intelligence to where an average American can make a decision about what they saw.
Malcolm, since you brought up Charlie Kirk, and I don't mean to sound so conspiratorial myself, but I have to ask you this. Did you find it peculiar in the Kirk shooting that before the shooting, the security detail behind him, at least two of the guys and maybe one of the women, they kind of had these interesting hand movements that look like the movements that baseball
Baseball
coaches.
sense, yeah.
Yeah. Did that strike you as odd?
Well, what struck me as odd is that he had a security detail of people who looked like they were much older than him and much more experienced. And the only thing that, I was a designated marksman when I was in the Ukrainian army. I'm a long distance shooter. I own a plethora of sniper weapon systems. And when I went through bodyguarding school, I mean, I managed bodyguards in Iraq. One of the first things that I learned, is check the roofs. Okay. How do you miss the fundamentals? That's like saying, you're looking for a guy with a handgun or a long rifle in the audience. Right? The problem with that is they have a racist attitude towards the way people shoot. They think that other than the DC snipers case, that African Americans don't shoot or handle long rifles, right? They use an AK-47, a cut down, or a handgun or something like that, or these near shooters is what they may have looked for. If they were a real professional security detail, they should be blacklisted because you search the venue, then you search the individuals, and then you secure the venue. Butler, Pennsylvania, after Butler, no one should have been speaking without a check of a roof, right? Just as simple as that.
Malcolm Nance. Malcolm, tell us once more where to find your Substack and where to find your podcast.
Yeah, you can find my podcast on YouTube. It's Black Man Spy Podcast. I also have my Substack, which is my special intelligence and Black Man Spy. You can watch my videos on either place at malcolmnance.substack.com.
All right. Malcolm, always my brother. Pleasure to hear your voice. Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have your analysis with your experience. It's invaluable. Okay, man.
Okay.
Thank you.
You call me when we go to war this week.
I will. All right, man. Thank you very much. All right. Take care. Malcolm Nance, everyone joining us here on Make It Plain, MIP on 89.3. Malcolm raises some interesting questions. At this hour, I mean, if you look at all the news reporting, the alleged shooter drove from Washington State to Washington, D.C. That's 4 or 5 days worth of driving. So, yeah. And what's interesting is I don't see other media asking questions about where the car is. So, that's something to really, really think about. Did he park in a, you can't just, for those of you who don't know, you can't just pull up in Farragut West in Washington, D.C. and find a parking space. It's not a conspiracy theory if you're asking questions. That's all. Where's the car? And back in the days when journalism was both an art and a science, we've given way to some of that. Citizen journalism is fine. But journalism is something some of us learned in school. Some of us are degreed in journalism. And the most important aspect of journalism is asking who, what, when, where, why, and how. That's not conspiratorial. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And in this point, this is just focusing on the vehicle. Where was it parked? Who, what, when, where? When was it parked? When and where? How was it parked even? And then how did you happen to find these individuals? So it's likely when you get into it that this is someone who was disturbed in some way, and that happens. But to weaponize it, to subjugate further the citizens of Washington, D.C., WPFW, in Washington, D.C., 89.3, to subjugate the people of Washington, for Donald Trump to use it to further subjugate the people of Washington, D.C. with military occupation. That is a fact. That is what is happening. The judge ruled D.C. should not be occupied by military. The D.C. Attorney General filed this case. The Trump administration's deployment of the National Guard in D.C. for crime control was unlawful and it violated the district's Home Rule Act. Thank God we have some type of Home Rule Act in Washington, D.C. He did give the Trump administration until December 11th, that's 10 days from today, to file an appeal. Undoubtedly, that appeal will be filed with an argument inclusive of what happened last week with the National Guard shootings. And, well, you know, I started to say thoughts and prayers, but they say that all the time, and it is meaningless. Deepest sympathies go out to the young lady who died, was only 20 years old. She hadn't even done anything yet for anybody to be mad at her for at 20, right? But nevertheless, she lost her life, and that is terrible. And I can only imagine what her family must be going through. And it's doubly tough. Because what families do, they think, why did this happen? They even ask God, why? And I'm a minister. People do, why did this happen? Why is my child dead? Who did this? Why did this person do this? Now me, see, I would struggle with those questions. And then Malcolm Nance gives us a different perspective. Quick calls in the time we have remaining, 202-588-0893. We have to ask ourselves, what caused this? What were the conditions that drove this person to this madness? And as Malcolm Nance said, you're settling people in a country that is a racist country. And these are Islamic people. These are Afghans. It's no telling. This is not justified. But there's no telling what he might have experienced. We have no idea. Hopefully we'll know. But the chances are we won't know. We will never know what triggered him, what caused his experience for this to happen. Because these stories happen all the time, and we don't hear anything else about it. It's just gone. And the news cycle, all it's looking for many times is, we found a suspect. Move on. Now we're talking about Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Now remember, we did a show on that a couple of weeks ago. Just want to remind you, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Black Friday and Cyber Monday. I hope you all remember what we discussed. Anyway, great to be with you this week. It has been made plain.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.